Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, you, our curious learner, are getting what is basically a masterclass in autonomy.
Yeah, a really highly unusual one,
All
actually.
right, because we have a single, just fascinating document on the table today called What a Boarder Can Learn from Spider-Man.
Which, sounds a bit absurd at first glance.
It totally does. I
Yeah.
mean, our mission here is to figure out how the chaotic, high-stakes ethics of a comic book hero map while flawlessly onto the unglamorous cinder block world of a teenage boarding school.
Exactly, because usually when we talk about superheroes, the stakes are just undeniably
Oh
obvious.
yeah, you get bitten by a radioactive bug, the sky lights up with a giant beam of energy, and suddenly you're throwing cars around.
Right, saving the city. But taking that massive cosmic scale and shrinking it down to like a dorm room in a dining hall,
It requires us to look at heroism in a completely different way.
it forces us to look at the underlying mechanics of how any of us handles newly acquired freedom. What we're unpacking here isn't really just about teenagers or superpowers at all.
No, it's a universal framework.
Precisely. Whether you're living in a shared dorm right now or, I don't know, you're a professional navigating a complex corporate office.
Or you haven't seen the inside of a classroom in 20 years.
Yeah. The dynamic of power, community, and responsibility that we are about to explore, it applies directly to how you operate in the world.
So let's jump right into the catalyst for that framework. In the comic books, the inciting incident is, it's always dramatic.
Always.
But in the reality of a student heading to boarding school, the sudden arrival of power is simply everyday freedom.
Yeah. They're suddenly handed this massive influx of independence.
Right, they have to make their own decisions regarding study habits, friendships, their daily behavior, sleep schedules, like everything.
Think about the psychological shock of that transition, though. For the first 14 or 15 years of their lives, these students have existed in a highly monitored environment.
Oh, absolutely.
Their schedule, meals, social interactions, even their bedtime. It's all been structured and largely enforced by their family.
And then almost overnight, that external scaffolding is just completely removed.
Completely gone. They become the primary author of their own daily existence. And, that sheer volume of unstructured autonomy is a massive psychological load for a developing brain.
I see the parallel we're drawing here, but honestly, isn't calling everyday independence a superpower a bit of a stretch?
How so?
Well, deciding whether or not to do your biology homework doesn't exactly carry the same weight as, say, stopping a supervillain from blowing up a bridge.
It does, if you consider what power actually is within the context of a microsociety.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Power is simply the capacity to influence your environment and the people within it. When a student is suddenly granted the absolute autonomy to dictate their own routine, they hold the power to either positively contribute to their community or actively degrade it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if a teenager decides to stay up until 3 a.m. blasting music or consistently leaves their belongings scattered across a shared common room.
They are wielding their freedom in a way that actively harms the well-being of their peers.
Exactly. The core argument in the source material is that choices have immediate, tangible consequences. We all know the famous Spider-Man ethos.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Right. And the reason that resonates isn't because of the webs or the wall crawling. It's because the character fundamentally understands that his actions ripple outward.
He doesn't choose responsibility because it's easy.
No, he chooses it because he recognizes his capacity to affect others.
Okay, so if the power in this scenario is just everyday autonomy, how do they even know when to use it?
What do you mean?
I mean, there's no Green Goblin blowing up the dining hall to trigger their spidey sense, right? The battles in a boarding house are completely subtle.
Oh, absolutely. They are almost entirely invisible to everyone except the person fighting them.
Right.
But that invisible nature is exactly what makes these environments such brilliant pressure cookers for character development.
Okay, yeah.
The real tests of this newfound power aren't explosive. They're quiet, everyday moral choices that happen in the margins of the day.
Like what? What are we talking about here?
It's the decision of whether to include or exclude a socially awkward peer from a group conversation.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's choosing whether to speak up when you witness unkind behavior or whether to admit a mistake when you could easily just hide it and hope nobody notices.
Wait, let's pause on that because there's a specific point in the framework that I really need to challenge here.
Sure, go for it.
It classifies following expectations when unsupervised as a moral choice.
Yes, it does.
Now, if I'm a teenager alone in a hallway
Mm.
and I choose not to break a rule just because the teacher isn't looking, Is that truly a moral victory?
You're saying it's something else.
Yeah, isn't that just basic self-preservation? Like, I'm just following the rules so I don't get grounded or lose my weekend privileges.
Well, if your motivation is purely the fear of getting caught, then yes, that is merely obedience.
Right.
And obedience is absolutely a form of self-preservation.
Yeah.
But let's look at the mechanism of what happens when the threat of that consequence is entirely removed.
Oh,
When you are truly unsupervised, the power is 100% in your hands. You could break the expectation, and you know for a fact there will be no penalty.
because nobody's there to see it.
Exactly. Choosing to adhere to the shared routines in that specific moment, not out of fear, but out of a fundamental respect for the community you live in, is what elevates a mundane rule into a moral choice.
Because you're actively choosing the community's well-being over your own momentary convenience.
Precisely. Think of a community's culture as like a communal trust bank account.
A bank account, I like that.
Yeah, every time a student chooses integrity in an unseen moment,
Yeah.
they're making a micro deposit into that account.
Wow.
They're reinforcing the architectural load-bearing walls of that micro-society. Character isn't forged in public declarations.
No, it's forged through the repetitive physical act of making the right choice when no one is watching.
And that repetitive action physically shapes neural pathways. It builds a foundation of profound self-respect and communal trust that fundamentally alters how that student carries themselves in the world.
That makes total sense in theory. But practically speaking, how do you actually convince a 15-year-old to prioritize those micro deposits over sitting at the cool table?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. We can sit here and talk about the nobility of quiet integrity all day, but doing the right thing in a highly pressurized social environment comes with a massive, immediate social cost.
It does.
If standing up for an isolated peer means you are going to get mocked by the dominant social group, that is a terrifying prospect for a teenager.
It's not just terrifying socially, honestly. It registers as a literal biological threat.
Wait, a biological threat, really?
Oh, yeah. To understand why this is so difficult, we have to look at the evolutionary psychology of peer pressure. Humans are biologically wired to seek group belonging.
Because of survival.
Exactly. For our ancestors out on the savannah, being ostracized from the tribe meant certain death. You could not survive alone.
So the brain treats it as life or death.
Yes. A teenager's brain is evolutionarily programmed to view social exile as a fatal scenario. When we ask a student to prioritize their long-term character over the short-term comfort of fitting in, we are asking them to perform a deeply unnatural psychological feat.
We're basically asking them to actively fight a primal survival instinct.
Exactly.
Man, that puts the heroism into a completely different perspective. We're not just asking them to be nice.
No, not at all.
We're asking them to override their own amygdala. They have to willingly make themselves a target for the sake of a principle.
And that is exactly where the comic book parallel becomes so poignant.
Right.
Think about the classic trope of Spider-Man. He is frequently misunderstood, vilified by the daily newspaper.
Chased by the very police he is trying to help.
Yes, he has to constantly endure public criticism and alienation for the greater good of the city.
And for a boarding student, the dynamic is exactly the same, just scaled down to a dorm hallway.
Exactly. They must learn to tolerate temporary unpopularity. They have to sit with the extreme discomfort of standing alone to support someone else or to maintain their personal values.
But what is the psychological payoff for enduring that kind of isolation? If their brain is screaming at them that social exile is dangerous, how do they survive it without just breaking down?
The payoff is the development of genuine, unshakable confidence.
Okay.
Most people operate under the illusion that confidence comes from external validation, from everyone liking you.
Right, getting the likes, getting the approval.
Yeah, but true psychological resilience is built through the mechanism of enduring that exact social discomfort and realizing that you didn't die.
Ah, so you learn that you can survive the disapproval of the crowd.
As long as you have your own internal approval, surviving those highly uncomfortable moments of standing alone is exactly what forges lasting self-worth. You prove to your own brain that your principles are stronger than your primal fears.
You survive the disapproval of the crowd as long as you have your own approval. That is a heavy realization.
It really is.
But frankly, it also sounds exhausting. We're expecting a teenager to balance the biological need for social belonging, the demands of their academic schedule, the friction of shared living spaces, and the maintenance of their own moral principles.
It's a lot.
It is an impossible high-wire act. And if you're juggling that many variables, failure isn't just a possibility, it's an absolute guarantee.
Absolutely.
They are going to drop the ball, they are going to be selfish or exhausted or cave to peer pressure at some point.
Perfection in this environment is a statistical impossibility. And the framework we are exploring explicitly acknowledges this.
Does it?
Yeah, just as Peter Parker constantly struggles to balance his personal life with his heroic responsibilities.
Often failing spectacularly at both, I might add.
Exactly. Boarders face a constant grinding tension between their personal desires and the needs of the group. Learning maturity involves managing time, showing empathy when you're sleep deprived, and taking initiative when you'd rather be lazy.
That is a massive mental load.
It is, and the friction of that load guarantees that mistakes will be made.
See, this is where I struggle with the practical application of this philosophy.
They're already getting stuck.
If we acknowledge that trial and error is just a baked-in feature of the environment, doesn't that inherently give bad behavior a free pass?
I see what you mean.
Yeah, like if a student lashes out at a roommate or blatantly disrespects a shared space, do we just chalk it up to, well, they're learning, it's all part of the process? How does a community maintain any standard of behavior if failure is just expected?
This is a crucial distinction. Acknowledging that mistakes will happen is not the same as excusing the behavior.
Okay, so where does the responsibility come in?
The concept of responsibility doesn't end when the mistake is made. In fact, that is exactly when the deepest work begins.
Right.
The heroism isn't in avoiding the mistake. The heroism is in the mechanics of the repair.
Break that down for me. What do the mechanics of repair actually look like in a micro-society? Because a quick sorry in the hallway doesn't magically fix the damage.
Not at all. Think of a community's social fabric like muscle tissue.
Muscle tissue, okay.
When a student makes a selfish choice or breaks a rule, they create a micro tear in that social fabric. A superficial apology does nothing to heal that tear.
So what heals it?
Active repair, which requires a specific, incredibly uncomfortable psychological process. First, the student has to engage in honest self-reflection.
Meaning they have to clearly identify exactly what they did wrong and why it caused harm.
Yes, and without making excuses. Second, they have to accept guidance and feedback from staff or peers.
Which requires suppressing their own defensive ego.
Exactly.
They have to sit there and listen to how their actions negatively impacted someone else, which is incredibly uncomfortable.
It is deeply uncomfortable. But that discomfort is the catalyst for growth.
Right.
The final step is taking tangible action to repair the damaged relationship or restore the shared space. And when a community focuses on this active repair process rather than just purely punitive measures, something fascinating happens.
What's that?
Just like muscle tissue grows back stronger after it's torn, a relationship that goes through the cycle of fracture and genuine active repair often ends up with a higher level of trust than it had before the offense ever occurred.
Wow, that completely flips the script on how we view failure.
It does.
Mistakes aren't just lingering resentments that poison the atmosphere. They are the actual raw materials used to build stronger communal bonds.
If you have the courage to do the repair work.
If you have the courage, yes.
Exactly. And this brings us to the ultimate purpose of these environments. Boarding houses, or really any intense shared living situations, they're not just places to sleep while you get an education.
What are they then?
They're sociological incubators. They're miniature, accelerated societies where people learn in real time how the mechanics of human interaction actually work.
Yeah.
The skills developed in this pressure preparing, cooker managing unsupervised autonomy, resisting the biological pull of negative peer pressure, and mastering the complex art of repairing fractured relationships, these are the foundational blocks of a functioning civilization.
Which means this isn't just about surviving high school. If you can navigate the complex, unwritten rules of a dorm hallway with integrity, you are building the exact psychological toolkit required for future leadership.
Without a doubt.
You're learning how to manage people, how to build organizational culture, and how to maintain your own ethical compass in the face of corporate or societal pressure.
You are learning how to wield power responsibly in a world that is desperate for thoughtful leaders.
This has been such a revealing way to decode the chaos of shared living. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to take this framework and hand it directly to you, the learner listening right now.
Because it applies to everyone,
Exactly. You may not be a teenager in a boarding school. You certainly don't have radioactive spider powers. You can't stick to walls or swing between skyscrapers.
assuming they can anyway.
Right. But you undeniably possess the exact same power we've been talking about today. Absolute autonomy to influence the environment and the people around you.
That's the real superpower.
Yeah. Every single decision you make, how you speak to a colleague under pressure, how you manage your own visible habits, how you treat the shared spaces in your life when absolutely no one is watching, it all casts a very long shadow.
It does. It shapes your character, and it builds or degrades the trust of your community. Responsibility isn't about achieving some impossible standard of flawless execution.
Definitely not.
It's about making deliberate, thoughtful choices,
Hmm.
owning the impact when you inevitably drop the ball, and having the courage to actively repair the fractures you cause.
But before we let you go, let's take this concept out of the physical world entirely. We spent this entire time talking about the moral choices we make in physical shared spaces.
Which naturally leads to a much more modern dilemma.
Go on.
If the ultimate test of our character is what we do when we are unsupervised and shielded from immediate consequences, then the internet is the ultimate unmonitored boarding house.
Oh, wow. That is a terrifying thought.
Think about it. When you log on, you are granted complete, unsupervised autonomy, often cloaked in total anonymity.
Right, there are no teachers in the hallway.
None. There is no immediate physical consequence for cruelty or negligence. So the question you have to ask yourself is this. When you are operating in the digital sphere, wielding the absolute power of anonymity, are you using that freedom to build a communal trust, or are you just another villain tearing the city apart?